Okay. Wow. It looks like there are 70 people plus. Thank you for being here. I'm David, and I'm really excited to have this chance to talk with you about plain language. Except I sort of had an epiphany uh, early this morning as I was thinking about this presentation, and I realized that you probably aren't the people I need to talk to. I mean, if you're here, that means that you have an awareness of plain language, that you value it, that you understand its role, its critical role in health literacy. Most of you probably know more than I do about it. Most of you could probably have this conversation yourselves doing the presentation. What I would love to be able to do is talk to those people who just for some reason they just don't get it. I'm gonna flip my slide. This is sort of our roadmap. This is where we're gonna go. We're going to go through plain language, why it matters, why it's important to use it, the barriers to plain language. But what I really want to focus on, I want you to be able to leave here with some concrete ideas that you can put to use immediately. So this is where we're headed. But I want to get as quickly to the nuts and bolts of it as I can. I'm surmising that you're here because you have an interest in plain language, that you're familiar with it. Maybe you want to pick up something that you didn't know before. Maybe you want to chat with some of your colleagues and compare notes. I think it's terrific that you're here, and I'm so glad that you are. The screen that you see on before you now, the why I'm here screen. What I blurred out is a lot of some reviews. I've spent the last 4 years, I've been working primarily with health literacy professionals, reviewing their stuff. Before that, I worked in regulatory and advertising insurance for a fairly large company. And in my roles is in regulatory and compliant or advertising work, I was in the position of having to do quite a bit of writing and quite a bit of editing. And what I picked up along the way was that a lot of people in corporate America don't really they don't really value clear communications. And that's why I was so excited when I made the adjustment, when I moved to working with health literacy 4 or 5 years ago, because then I would be working with people who really got it. They understood that messages need to be clear and concise, and they had to be effective. The faded out documents, these are track changes from quite a bit of the health literacy materials that I've had a chance to review in the last few years. And I've been amazed that health literacy professionals sometimes they're really no better than their corporate America counterparts, which throws me because within health literacy, we understand the value, the importance of plain language. But time and time again, I see submissions where it just blows me away. I don't understand. And I'm going to show you some examples as we go through of what I'm talking about. So that's why I say that the people whose examples that I'm going to show you, those are people that I would really like to have a conversation with. And what's funny, what's hilarious, I think, is some of the people that have the most red lines, and so all the red is strike throughs, right? And all the blue are additions that I made during the edits. And it's amazing the people who submit things to be reviewed, the ones who have PhDs behind their names. Wow. I'll show you some examples. It's incredible. And what I have heard word on the street, is that there are some health literacy professionals who say, oh yeah, well, sure, I can use plain language when I clock in. I can use plain language during my 9 to 5, but I'm not using it on my time. I'm not using it on my time off. And I would like to challenge that approach, because what I've discovered is, as long as I've been doing this, I still catch myself when I'm writing doing the stupidest stuff. I know better, and I'm writing it. And part of that, here's one of our barriers. This is one of the things that we're challenged by. We all come to our jobs. We come to the work that we do with the depth and the breadth of all of our experience. This is an example that was pointed out to me when I was in college. I had a professor who brought it to my attention. So if I wish this were live and in person, because I would love to be able to talk with you through it. But and I don't have it on a slide, so I'm going to spell a word. All right. And then I want you, if you would, to say that word. And then we'll talk about it. I mean, I will talk to you about it. All right, so here's the word. Greasy. Greasy. How do you pronounce it? How many of you say greasy with the S? Greasy. When we did this exercise in my college classroom, all I had ever heard my entire life, because I grew up in the deep South, it was greasy with a Z, a really hard greasy. And it never occurred to me that there was any other way to pronounce that word until someone else brought it to my attention. They raised this point, and it was such a revelation for me. It was one of the first times that I began to have some awareness that A, I wasn't the center of the universe, and B, people had other approaches and thoughts about life than I did, and it was just amazing. And I think that's one of the problems that we run into when we're writing, is that A, we have our whole history. We have this whole schema, our whole background of all of the words and the phrases and the colloquialisms that we grew up with. It's what we heard in our families and at our schools, and it's the language that we heard at our churches and on the ball fields. Depending on where you're from, you just have a certain way of talking. So, for example, this is one of the phrases that I used in my in the description. is I very often see people write in order to, when you don't need the in order part. I mean, if they're 9 times out of 10, most often your writing is going to be a lot more concise and to the point if you just start with to do whatever you do it. But the reason that we have this compulsion, it's not really a compulsion. It's just second nature to use in order before in order to, because that's the language that we've known all of our lives. That's what we've heard all of our lives. That's what we've used. And really, there's no reason to question it. So if there's anything that you get out of our discussion today, I really hope that it's simply to just start being aware of your own writing when you're communicating. I want you to ask yourself, why do I write the things that I do? Or is it because I'm just going on autopilot? I have an idea in my head and I'm on a timeline. I've got to get something done, right? And I just get it down and I just write it and I send it and I go off. And that's always been perfectly fine. But what I would say to you is, for health literacy professionals, it's different. It's different from people who are working in banking or industry or insurance. Because with us in health literacy, if we don't get it right, there could be some serious consequences. When we're dealing with people's health, when we're trying to communicate these very critical messages, we don't have a lot of latitude for getting it wrong, which is why I would strongly encourage each of you, as you're writing, to think about, why am I writing the way that I'm writing now, and to be self-aware. One of the examples I'll share with you in a minute, and this is my personal pet peeve. I hate it. Utilize. I was doing we were doing 100 years ago in another lifetime, we were doing a Lean Six report out event. So I was facilitating this meeting, and we had these frontline employees who, they knew their system inside and out. But these were, I mean, for the most part, they were fairly young kids. I mean, they were like college age, just right out of college. And as each one of them had to get up and report about their part of the process, time and time again, I would hear them saying, well, in order to do this, we utilize this program, and we utilize these procedures, and it was utilized over and over and over again. And I said, hey, I have a question. Guys, why not just use? Because, use is simpler. And we won't get into it now, but there is a difference. There is a difference between use and utilize. And I can tell you what that is later. But one of the young guys in the classroom, he said, I mean, he just looked at me. Well, most of them did, just sort of dumbfounded. And he said, David, if we use, if we don't use utilize, people won't think we're smart. And I was kind of stunned. And that was another time in my life that a reality just kind of smacked me upside the head. And I discovered that there are times when people are writing that their objective is not to clearly and effectively and quickly communicate a message, a lot of times, whether they admit or not, whether they know it or not, a lot of times they just want other people to acknowledge them as an intelligent person, as someone of value. So as you're going through your own writing and you're becoming self-aware of why you write the things you write, why you express the things that you express, ask yourself, what is your reason for writing it? Are you writing to affect some sort of positive outcome? Or are you writing to impress people with how smart you are? Simple language may not make you look like a Harvard PhD, but it will certainly get your messages across better to your audience. Let me go to the next slide. Anybody get an earworm? Do you hear the song in your head? I heard it the other day. Well, actually, a couple of days ago, a week ago. And I thought, my God, Gloria, that's it. That's it. The words, I find myself stumbling all over them. I'm trying to write something. I'm trying to communicate some idea, and there's so much I want to put into it. I just want to cram all of this information into this message. And the next thing I know, it's this huge, unwieldy, cumbersome mess. And I have to figure out how to unravel it because I know better, right? I know that messages need to be clear and they're concise and they need to be simple. But I so often trip over my words. They get in my way. And I had to learn, and I hope that you will too, is that you can't always say all of the things that you want to say. Sometimes you have to pick and choose. You have to, so as you'll see, it was go through some of these examples. There are what do you call them? Streams or items in a series, right? So the sentence will start off with, this group is responsible for producing this and 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 this. And they're responsible for producing this as well. And they put this on the paper and they send it to the reader, and the reader gets it. And it's just when you're confronted with a wall of text, it becomes a barrier. So what you don't want to do, you want to make reading for your readers as easy as possible, as accessible as possible. You want to make absolutely sure that you, from the very outset, you are not putting up any barriers to reading. And I've said it time and time again because it's true. With plain language, success is being able to write, being able to convey information in small, easily digestible chunks. And then you'll see what I mean as I go on. You can get to parts of your message that are more complicated, that are more convoluted. You can get there. But just try to not hit your reader upside the head with it at the very beginning. There's I forget what the statistic is. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but we are living in a very different age right now. We are inundated with messages all the time. There are so many different entities that are vying for our attention. I read somewhere that if you're trying to get someone to tune in to a message that you're sending, you've got 8 seconds to grab them. If you don't grab them in 8 seconds, they've tuned out. They've gone their way. And of course, it makes sense when you think about it, right? Because we are, as a society, we are conditioned for instant gratification. We're being conditioned to expect that things are easy. We don't have to go out to the hen house and snap the neck of a chicken to have dinner anymore. All we have to do is go through a drive-through. And now we don't even have to do that. We can just have chicken delivered to us. Never before have things been so convenient, so readily available. We don't have to lift fingers anymore. So if you send someone a message that you want them that they need to read and comprehend and take action on, if you don't pull them in the first 8 seconds, if you don't make it easy and easily digestible, so that they enjoy, they're hooked, they're pulled in, they enjoy. If you throw up any sort of barrier at all, they're out of there, and it's understandable. So, as you're tailoring your messages, be aware of how you can make it as simple as possible, especially at the very beginning, as you ease people into your message, and then you can get a little more robust. I really like the slide. I think it's kind of groovy. You'll notice that at the very bottom, I did put concept density because I wasn't sure that I could read what was in the big mustard letters. And I thought if I'm writing them and I can't even read it, I should probably include a clue as to what I'm talking about. And if this makes your skin crawl a little bit, this very tight, compact phrasing, this concept density, if it makes you squirm a little bit because it's so complicated and confusing, well, that's purposeful. I did that on purpose because I want to convey to you, when we talk about concept density, that is one of the biggest issues with plain language. And I see it over and over and over again. So for most of the rest of the time that we're talking, I'll squeeze as much in as I can. I hate I only have an hour with you because really I need about 2-3 weeks to talk about all the things that we need to talk about. But the first one, the most important, is concept density. And we want the opposite of that. So let me show you what I mean. When we talk about concept density, I am looking at 2 different things. I'm looking at structure, as in, how is your message structured? Are you using simple sentences? Are you using complex sentences? Are you using compound sentences? Are you using complex compound sentences? Where do you put the most important points of your message? Where do you give thought to where you can strategically place the points that you really want to drive home? Because you can do that. This is a good time for me to say this. Maybe. When it comes to writing, when it comes to language, when it comes to wordplay, when it comes to expressing yourself, a lot of times it really is more art than science. I'm not very good with English. I'm not real good with grammar. It's not my strong suit. But I can read something and know whether or not it makes sense to me. Because a lot of times it doesn't. And that may be because I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, and that's fine. But I also think that makes me a great litmus test for you health literacy professionals who are writing these messages. If you send it to David and David reads it and his eyes glaze over and he doesn't get it, chances are good that other readers won't also. So this is the first time in my life that I've ever been sort of proud of being kind of stupid. But when I review it, I sort of I think it's akin to playing piano by ear. You know those people who they don't read music, but if they hear a tune, they can play it. I'm not that way with music, but I kind of feel that way with language and with wordsmithing. And I say that because there are no absolutes. I can't share with you any absolute truths, because that's just not the way it is. There are so many exceptions to our language. There are so many, expressing ourselves is so very objective. And there's just a lot of room for interpretation. So I don't want you to think that everything that I'm sharing with you today is carved in stone. I'm not laying down some grand proclamation that this is the way to do it. What I'm doing is I'm sharing with you some of the ways that I've seen that absolutely don't work. And I'm going to offer some suggestions. But a lot of it is something you're going to have to figure it out as you do it. And that's another really good reason why you shouldn't be one of those, I'm a plain language person from 9 to 5. Because if you don't live plain language day in and day out, it's never going to become second nature to you. You'll never get that comfortable with it. It has to be in the forefront of your mind. You have to understand how incredibly important it is, and you have to put forth the investment to learn how to master it. Here's the thing about communication. And you'll see this as we go through some of these examples. I think that a lot of plain language professionals don't really get how much of a challenge, how difficult writing in plain language can be. And why should they? Because we've all grown up with our language. From our earliest memories, when we first learned how to talk and to communicate, my God, we've been doing it all of our lives. We've been fine. We've read Dick and Jane. We know how to talk simply. We know that there's nothing to it. And I was going to include a slide that said it's deceptively simple. But then I started wondering about deceptively simple, and I realized that it could mean a couple of things. It could mean that it's really simple, but it looks hard, so it's deceptively simple, or it's really hard and it looks simple, which still applies. It's deceptively simple. So the lesson from that, I think, is that we have to be able to pull back and look at the language that we're using. We have to be able to pull back and look at the messages that we're sending and analyze them and try to figure out if there is any if there's any way that our messages could be misinterpreted. This is a fun example. I mean, it's simple. It's a very simplistic example, but I think it serves to illustrate the point. A lot of times when I'm teaching classes and I want to impress upon the class how important it is to check for understanding, and how important it is to just not assume that people have the same context, they have the same life experience that you do, because obviously they don't, right? So this is what I do in my class. I tell my students, I say, close your eyes, and I'm going to say a word, and then I'll ask you to open your eyes. Okay. So if you were in my class when we were doing it now, I would say, close your eyes, and you close your eyes. And I would say, bark, bark. And then I would ask you to open your eyes. And I would say, all right, all right, all right. How many of you saw a tree? And hands would go up. I saw a tree, I saw a tree. How many of you saw a dog? In another section of hands would go up. Oh yeah, I absolutely saw a dog. And I would say, did anybody see anything else? And invariably, there's someone in the back who says, yeah, I thought of Aunt Jane's last birthday cake, which is just really random and out there. But it's perfect to illustrate the point, because if you're sending a message and you mean tree, but the words that you use could be interpreted by other people to mean something other than tree, or something not even in the tree ballpark, like the cake, you have to do everything you can on the front end to guard against that. Plain language is a work. It's a lot of work. And the work is going to get done either way. It's either going to get done when we sit down to compose our messages and we think through it, or it's going to get done when our messages are sent and the recipient has to sit down with our message and try to figure out, has to put in the work to try to understand what it is exactly that we're trying to say. I don't know if by this message, the person who wrote it, I don't know if he meant tree or dog. I can't tell. So the work is going to happen. It's either going to happen on the front end when we compose the messages, when we have the time to sit down and to think through them and try to look at the messages from others' perspectives. Or it's going to happen on the back end when the reader gets it. Or again, 8 seconds, buddy. Maybe it won't happen at all. They'll get your message and they'll just delete it, or they'll throw it in the mail, just because if there's a barrier to their reading it, they're just not going to bother. And then nobody wins. Okay, that was enough of a diatribe. So structure, how messages are composed, and then of course the words that we use to compose them. I hope that you're familiar with plainlanguage.gov, because it is an absolute godsend for those of us who are interested in plain language. They have so many resources and so many materials, and someday, if we were sitting down and having a cup of coffee together, I would tell you how terribly unfortunate it is that plain language is named plain language. Somebody in their marketing department just did not do a good job. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail now. We'll have that conversation later. The phrase plain language is underwhelming, but their website is great. And on their website, they give some guidance as to how to manage concept density. And their advice really boils down to counting words. And I think that's one of the only tips of theirs that I take exception with. I think it's more complicated than just counting words. I think that we have to seriously consider the meaning behind the words that we use. I could use, in 3 to 8 sentences, I could use 150 words, but there must be some accounting taken into consideration for the quality of those words and whether they not express. I think that if we just say, hey, count the words, and as long as you're within this range, you're good to go, I don't trust it, which is why as I'm reviewing things, I like to think of the messages that I'm reading, the materials that I'm reading in terms of concepts. How many concepts are being conveyed at any given time? So I thought we'd start simple to sort of dip our feet in. Joseph walks home. How many concepts is that? And then it's 3. Those are 3 ideas that your reader would need to remember. That the subject is Joseph, and that the action that he's taking, he's walking, and his destination is home. So that's 3 things. So that's easy, right? That's 3 concepts for your reader to keep in mind. But then what happens when you come across a sentence like this? So this is one sentence. The Marketing Analyst Professional Credentialing video series consists of 18 segments across 8 marketing analyst modules developed to enhance your formal education and matter of course skills. How many concepts is that? It's 5. And I've broken it down and I've done some color coding, and please bear with me and forgive me because the slides get a lot more chaotic than I would want them to. But I'm using color coding to sort of help guide us through our process. So on this side, I've got the sentence, but I've broken it down by each of the concepts, and then just so you could see which each of the concepts were, I have them numbered on the right. So we're still talking about this example 2. And we're talking about some of the problems we have with it. The very first one is the name of this series, the Marketing Analyst Professional Credentialing video series. That's the subject. That's a mouthful. Already, if you throw that kind of phrase out at a person at the very beginning of your message, unless they have a really vested interest in what you're trying to say, they just won't go any further. So that's one of the problems. In green, don't use 2 words when one will work. Don't weaken your verbs. Develop to enhance your formal education. So we've got developed and we have enhanced. A lot of times, verbs are so important. Verbs are so important. I mean, especially if your message is some sort of call to action. Would you believe that I have seen calls to action that didn't feature any verbs at all? It was incredible. It's like, hey, these are all things that we really want you to do for your health, for your well-being, but there was nothing explicit in there that told the reader exactly what they should be doing. There weren't any verbs. Verbs is a whole other thing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And avoiding unnecessary words. Along with this, at the end of this conversation, you will have access to the slide deck. And I also am sharing the style guide that I use. And most of it is created, well, it's almost all based on plainlanguage.gov guidelines. But I've also sort of colored it with my own experience. So it's sort of a work in progress, but I thought it would give you an idea of kinds of things to look for. And you'll see that when you see it. All right, hang on. Oh. Okay, so we went there. Are you getting dizzy? I'm getting a little dizzy. Okay, so here, same example, I'm doing a side by side. So the subject, the Marketing Analyst Professional Credentialing Video Series? No, you can't. You just, I mean, I know you got that copyrighted and trademarked, and that's your thing. That's important. But you have to be realistic. If you throw it at someone right off the bat, they're gonna tune out. There are places where you can convey that information. Maybe that information is in a header. Maybe that information is in a footer. Maybe it's in a sidebar. But don't make it the first thing that people see. So here, to remedy that, I replaced the Marketing Analyst Professional Credential Video Series with this series. Small bite-sized chunks. This series, instead of consists of, which is 2 words, I replaced it with 1 word, includes. I've been working on an analogy, and I have this plan. I was going to have this great slide deck, and I was gonna roll out this analogy today. It didn't happen, but one day. But here's the analogy. Let's say you've planted a garden. Maybe it's a flower garden. Maybe it's a vegetable garden. Maybe it's ornamental shrubs, whatever. And you've invested a lot of time, effort, and energy into it, and you're proud of it. And the last thing that you want is anything encroaching upon your garden. You don't want the weeds to come in, as they invariably will, and take it over. And with plain language, what you have to realize is, even though there's just 2 words here, consists of, once you put a whole message together, and you have instances where over and over again you've used multiple words when you could use fewer words, that's more that the weeds are encroaching upon your garden, the more that the weeds are strangling your message. So it behooves us to be conscientious in getting rid of the weeds from our messages. All right, so I'm still workshopping this analogy, but I think I think it has potential. Weed your garden. So this was one sentence on the left. I broke it into two sentences. I stopped it at the end of modules. And then instead of going that these modules were developed to enhance, I stopped the sentence at modules and I said, these videos will enhance not your formal education and matter of course skills, whatever the heck that means. They will enhance your professional skills. I think sometimes we, and depending on who we're communicating with, again, we feel that we have to put all these modifiers in. We have to make it sound really fancy, and we have to make it sound really important. And that's okay. I mean, we were all raised that way. That's what we were taught. That's one of the hardest things about plain language, is understanding that it's okay to break away from the traditions that you grew up with. We almost have to. Wow, time is flying. Okay, so on this screen, I recap what we did. So we took the whole message, and we separated it out into individual concepts. Well, here's a concept, here's a concept, here's a concept. And then we go back and we look at those concepts individually, and we think, does this work? Are there two words when one would suffice? Is this a sentence that's rambling on and on and on when it's just too much and it doesn't need to? Does it defy small digestible chunks? So we review it, we revise each individual concept as we need to. We go through it again to make sure that there's logic and flow throughout the whole thing. And then finally, we proofread it. Before we hit send, before we send it out, before we hit publish, we proofread it. Do you proofread when you write something? When you're sitting at your computer and you compose? What about if you're at your phone? What if you got your phone in front of you and you're texting, you're sending a message to your homies? Do you proofread it? Or is that just me? Okay, you don't have to proofread all the time, but it's helpful. All right, check this out. This was a submission I got. All right, I'm gonna do it. I mean, don't hate me, but if I had to endure this torture, I'm a sharer. I am. Nurses, medical practitioners, medical assistants, and other healthcare professionals are often required to create personalized printed information for patients. Procedural results, memos, post-visit reviews, emergency care and hospital discharge statements, and electric correspondence quickly at the time of patient-centered care. This aptitude-enhancing session will utilize time-proven strategies to help attendants effectively produce customized, detailed reports, and will be especially applicable for those programs that enable registrants to participate from the starting point to higher training of health literacy standards. I mean, it's almost a piece of art, right? But if you've written that, you've just thrown up a brick wall for your readers to slam their heads against. This is what this is what just it just baffles me. I don't understand how health literacy professionals, people who say, heck yeah, I believe in plain language, and they turn around. Okay, so a brick wall, right? So we went through the same process, and I know. Dear Lord, David, this is it's ridiculous. This is so much work. I can't. I don't have time to break down messages and figure out what the problems are, and then figure out how to fix them. I don't have that kind of time. But if you're invested in plain language, it's kind of a priority. The good news that it gets easier the more you do it. I won't bore you with the details of this one. On the left, I have 2 sentences and 16 concepts. And in the middle column for problems, I identify what some of the concerns are in the writing. And then I give a revision, not a provision, on the right. And then we get down to, this is the before and after. So on the left side, this is the text as it originally appeared. And I just broken it down into lines by concepts. Now, if I know you, and I think I do, you're thinking, David, you have lumped some concepts together there. Memos is a concept, and post-visit reviews, oh, that's another concept. And emergency care and hospital discharge, those are, why did you just group them together? And yes, you're right. You're right. You're right. Again, more art than science, but I also didn't have enough space on my slide to break them out into as many concepts as they would naturally be. So there is that. I took the very long, rambling message on the left and I broke it down into something that's a lot more palatable. We went from what I read you before to healthcare professionals often create information for patients at the time of care. This information includes test results, post-visit summaries, and discharge statements, period. Appropriate for attendees with wide ranges of experience, comma, this session uses proven strategies to effectively produce detailed reports. And if you are a keen-eyed observer, no doubt you have already noticed that there's quite a bit of stuff in the original message that did not make it to my revised message on the right. And that's okay. Well, I say that's okay as the person who didn't write it. But the idea is, as my good friend Gloria Stefan says, there's so much I want to say. And you just have to put in some restraints. You can't, you have all these ideas in your head. There's the topic that you're communicating about, there's so many different facets to it. And how can you choose which ones to leave out? You can't, because they're all worthy of discussion. And you can talk about them. You can talk about every single one of them if you want to, but you do it at the risk of losing your audience. So it comes down to a, which battles are you choosing kind of thing. So that is an example of going from increasingly difficult, cumbersome, convoluted messages to breaking it down more simply. And that brings us to our very last slide. Again, there are so many facets that I wanted to be able to share with you, and we just didn't have time. So I had to pick and choose. I ran through this. I went through it very quickly. But part of the reason that I'm at least a little bit comfortable doing that is because that I know that you will have access to the slide deck. And I put a lot of detail in there that I didn't address, I didn't point out. And that might be something interesting for you to discover as you're flipping through it. But also, please know, I think one of the worst things that any sort of presenter can do is say, hey, here's all this information and see ya. Because invariably, when you get back to your desk, when you start working, you'll run into a problem after problem after problem. You'll run into things that you have no idea how to deal with, and not a single one of them will be something that I discussed today. And you're thinking, I don't know what to do. So I'm available. My whole approach is service. I want to add value. I want to be helpful. And I would really like for you to help me with that. I would really like for you to be my emissaries, because as I said earlier, most of you don't. You're right. You know this. You could do this in your sleep. But you have colleagues. You work with people. You know people. Or they don't know it. They don't get it. They haven't made the connection. And they need to. And that's where you come in. So I'm hoping that this will give you a reason to point things out when you see them, to make people aware that there's a better approach. Because when we're talking about plain language, we're talking about health literacy. And when we're talking about people's health, that's serious. There's no room for ego or embarrassment. We have to take it seriously, and we have to care about each other. I'm David. We have a few minutes left, and by a few, I mean 2. So chat, I'm going to see questions. I will flip over and see what's going on. All right, so first question. Do you ever feel like highly educated folks have a hard time allowing themselves to write in plain language? Because ultimately, jargon gatekeeps their profession. Oh, that's a nice turn of phrase. I like that. I may steal it. Jargon gatekeeps their profession. Yep, that's true. Like, why do I have an MD if I have to talk like less educated people? If nothing else, remember this: we're in the same boat. We are all being inundated with messages all the time. There are all sorts of people who are competing for our attention. There are all sorts of people who are competing for the attention of your prospective readers. If you don't learn how to make it simple and make it quick and make it sexy, you're not going to get through to them, and other people will, and you don't get your message across. You don't get to fulfill your purpose, whatever purpose that is. Especially now, and I would say that's the biggest reason that people have to get comfortable with plain language, and they have to get comfortable with the idea that it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. How important is plain language when creating a video script, since it involves audio, video, motion, and often open captions? Our team uses PMAT scale, but we differ in opinion about assuring that the script is edited for 6th grade reading level. That's a really good question. Video, well, video has a lot of advantages. Video can be a lot more engaging than just plain text, obviously. But I would say that if whoever's reading the script, if your presenter is not using words that will connect with people, if they're not expressing ideas clearly, it would amount to the same thing. People will tune out. You've got to be able to hook them, and you have to be able to hook them, grab attention simply, and then take advantage of that. There are many benefits to video over just written text. But whatever the message is, whatever the means of communication, you have to make sure that it's easily digestible. Third question. What advice do you have for liaising between a research department and the rest of your team when it comes to communicating with plain language and translating complex or difficult topics into clear and actionable steps? That's a really incredible question. If you're working with a marketing team or a research department, you've got to get them on board. They have to understand, you have to impress upon them that their audience, your audience, is going to be so much broader if you produce materials that people can access, that they can read, they can understand, that they can engage with. It's not easy, because when you're dealing with teams of people, as you know, you are dealing with some personalities, and everyone has different priorities and different agendas. And I wish I had a magic wand to answer that. It's a really frustrating problem, and I feel it. I think one of the best things that you could do is try to find research, like my 8-second example. You have 8 seconds to get somebody's attention. If you have some real things that you can point to that say, hey, we might be more effective if we tried this approach because of these reasons, maybe you stand a better chance of getting through. I don't know, but I would be interested to see how it goes. Any other questions, comments? I see chats going crazy. We're over time. I will read through all of this later, and I would love to follow up with you and catch up. And to me, that's the most rewarding part, is having colleagues, people that I can talk with and share ideas. So if we're doing that, if we keep doing that, we're doing okay. Y'all, thank you so much. I appreciate your coming today. Keep it simple. Bye.